Hello and welcome to Backstage Pass, the show that brings you all the behind-the-scenes info on all of the arts. And this week, we're raising the curtain into the world of the theatre. We'll be heading to London's world-famous West End, going backstage in the costumes department of the Barn Theatre, as well as joining the crowd to watch some of London's street performers. We'll also be joined by Janet Weil, who'll be discussing her career and life surrounding costume design. So there's certainly a lot to look forward to.
There certainly is. Now, we all know that going to see a film or chilling at home with a couple of movies can be great with some friends. But how often do we think about pushing Hollywood aside for a night and going out to experience some live entertainment? Earlier today, we sent out our team to London to take a look around and find out just how popular theatre still is. So are we only happy in front of our big screens, or are we still drawn in by the excitement of a live performance?
Theatres have always been a good source of entertainment, but unlike cinema, it isn't potentially a spur-of-the-moment activity. With that in mind, have we started to become less interested in theatre, or are we making more of an effort?
You go see the cinema, you go in, you queue up, you get your ticket, you sit down, you get popcorn thrown at you, and then you leave. Whereas with the theatre, you go in and there's like, you can have a drink, talk to people and interact.
It's like you go for a meal and then you go to the theatre and it's like you dress up. You wouldn't dress up to go to the cinema, but I'd never go to the theatre in jeans. I don't think you're allowed. And if you are, you shouldn't be allowed because it's wrong.
Cinema, like, you just go there for you go watch the film and then you leave. You don't ever, there's no reason to stay.
I see the theatre as more of a night out.
I don't know, it is expensive. Well, the thing with theatre is you never really know what's going on, like what's on, like unless you actually actively go out to see it. Like, the only place you really see advertising for it is if you get in the underground in London.
According to a recent study, theatre has been steadily growing in popularity without any decline since 2007. Despite this, the cinema still manages to sell almost 100 million more tickets per year. So, just how popular is theatre?
Theatre's a very, very popular art form at the moment. You don't have to look very far to see that theatre's doing incredibly well, both in London and outside of the city. It's really one of the arts that's been just rising and rising in popularity in terms of audience over the past few years.
I think for young people, it's getting more mainstream to do it, but actually I don't think it's accessible to a lot of young people to kind of go.
I disagree actually. At the National Theatre, for starters, we have our Travel X season, which means that almost half of the tickets in our largest Olivier space are £10. And if you equate that to a West End cinema ticket, which is upwards of £15, then we're already looking at a better deal.
From a recent online poll, we discovered that most of you would rather spend money on a night out to the theatre than a trip to the cinema. Well, for me it's the theatre any day.
Felt sorry for the poor guy getting popcorn thrown at him. He said he didn't like the cinema
You see,
anymore.
that's why I don't like the cinemas. I prefer the theatre.
The theatre. I was going to say I'm cinema, but theatre, fair
well,
enough.
If you're like me, then I'm sure you've wondered what happens behind the scenes of these productions. Where do they get the ideas for those incredible costumes? And how are they made? Well, today we can bring you an exclusive look at the Barn Theatre's costumes department, where we had a chat with a wardrobe mistress.
Have you ever wondered what happens backstage during and after a performance? Well, I'm here at the Barn Theatre in Welwyn Garden City to find out what happens to the costumes after the actors take their final bow and the curtain closes. In its 78 years of existence, the Barn Theatre has seen many changes and many performances. Built on its present site around 1830, it was once known as the Handside Barn, a new farm for producing milk. Since the 1930s, the barn has been in continuous use, apart from a short spell during the World War II when it was taken over by the military. Since then, the barn has grown along with the costume department, and these days it welcomes a more peaceful and enjoyable atmosphere. Dressing up is part of the fun of acting, whether you're a child, an adult, an amateur or a professional. The costumes are part of the overall set design of the production. They create the impression of a historical period made by the set. If you have an interest in acting for the stage, then you're definitely going to have an interest in the costumes. Earlier today, I spoke to Judith Claxton, who told me about the costume department. Are you the last person to leave the theatre?
Yes. You mean during the run? Yes. Making sure the wardrobe's tidy and the dressing rooms are tidy and everything is hung up. But on the whole, we train our cast to hang their stuff up. But obviously every night you have to check that it's all clean, take away the washing. Yes, it's quite a task being wardrobe mistress for a show. Well, this season, the big job at the moment is, because we're heading for Christmas, is the Snow Queen. And that obviously is a big costume production. And there will be quite a lot of costumes made, but also a lot will be taken from our stock, because we do have a large stock, as you've no doubt already seen.
Have you had any mishaps with the children whilst working on the production?
No, they're very good, actually, when we do have children. They're fine. Costume-wise, we can't store a huge amount for them because there are so many different sizes. But we do have quite a lot of children coming if they're doing school projects. We have a list of all the costumes in their sort of periods and where they are. You know, say, for example, men, Georgian is B there, you know. So we know how to find things. But
do you have a favourite period and costume of your own?
I suppose I do. Victorian and Edwardian, possibly because I've dressed more shows that period, and I also used to dress a music hall, which we had in the Garden City for many years. So yes, maybe that's my favourite. We have a lot of costume of that period here.
It's not as easy as it sounds working in the costume department. Working alongside directors, hairstylists and makeup artists can be pretty hard going, especially for a large-scale production. But if you think you have a natural flair for design and historical costume, then being backstage is just for you. I think I'll keep this on.
Cool, because it's an actual barn and the theatre at the same time. Apparently they used to have cows in or
Was
something.
it an actual barn, or is
I
this a
think,
joke
yeah,
that's going on?
It was. Honestly, it was an actual barn. Our guest will tell us a bit more about that, though. Now, we'd like to welcome our next guest, Janet Weil, who's a costume designer for the Barn Theatre and is currently working on a local production of The Snow Queen. She's here to give us an insider's opinion, so thanks for joining us, Janet. And what sort of things are you guys up to at the moment, then, at the Barn Theatre?
Well, The Snow Queen's taking all our time at the moment, although there are 3 other performances in rehearsal.
Pretty hectic schedule, is it?
It is, yes,
so,
it is.
I mean, is the Snow Queen quite a sort of heavy one for doing costumes, or is it a reasonably simple one? Or?
No, it's quite an inventive one because, as you know, it's a fairy story, so you've got bags of scope.
That's true, that's true.
And is this a costume that's taken from the Snow Queen, I'm assuming?
Yes, this is the Snow Queen's outfit for the first act. She'll have another one for the second act, which will be much more unstructured and flimsy.
Wow.
She's going to be really warm in that, I think.
Yeah. She is, yes, she is, under the lights.
I mean, these are sort of amazing creations that you come up with. How do you get the ideas for these sort of things? Where do they come from?
You get your inspiration from all sorts of different places. It really depends on the play you're doing, the characters you're dressing and so on for fantasy costume. If you're doing period costume, you can obviously lift designs from proper researched designs and so on. So,
I mean, I can see influences of today's fashion in this costume here. I mean, like the fur and the hat, that's very in at the moment.
Yes, it is. The cut's fairly modern as well.
Yeah.
But you can do that when it's a fantasy piece. It really doesn't matter because it's of no particular period. It just needs to have a fantasy storybook quality to it.
And it's all sounding like you've got a big wealth of knowledge there from working for a long time in the Barn Theatre. What sort of information would you give to somebody that's maybe wanting to get involved in this sort of area?
If someone wants to get involved on an amateur level, just go down to their local theatre club and they'll be welcomed with open arms because wardrobe mistresses are very thin on the ground, certainly people who make and design. But if you're going into it professionally, obviously go down the training route. And
do you think the voluntary side of things is a good way of getting into it? You know, do you think you have to sort of do that sort of thing and just get involved as much as you can?
Yes, because it gives you a taste of the disciplines that you need to do theatre costume, because it is quite different doing an actual production than just making garments for streetwear.
I mean, there's obviously, I mean, at the Barn Theatre, it's quite a big setup. There's a lot of people working there. You've got production directors and everything like this. Where does the costume design come in that sort of hierarchy there? I mean, have you got a lot of control? Or?
It's usually at the bottom of the pile.
Is that what it is? You're the ones that matter, isn't it?
But just occasionally you get something that needs to be spectacular, really spectacular. And then, of course, wardrobe's really important.
Now, we're wanting to know some scandal, aren't we?
I know. Has the costumes, have they ever been mixed up behind the set?
Has there been any arguments or mix-ups and things like that? That's what we
There've
want to know.
never been any mix-ups, several arguments. You do have some egos to deal with, so...
I can imagine so.
So I mean, it's tended to sort of run in your family now, isn't it? This sort of costume design sort of thing. Your daughter's involved now. Do you learn from each other? Or?
We do, because she actually trained with theatre costume, which is quite a different discipline from fashion, where I trained, and we just trade each other's knowledge.
So you mentioned she's in theatre fashion. Is that a good way of getting into things then? Is that another way, maybe a route into sort of theatre costume design? Is that another route into that?
If you wanted to do it professionally, that's the way to go, I think, to go through college or university or whatever and take one of the basic costume either design courses or interpretation courses.
So it sounds good. It sounds like you've got a lot of work on your hands there. When can we actually see the Snow Queen, by the way?
The Snow Queen opens on Saturday.
On Saturday, we'll
yes.
book our tickets, I think. Oh, by the way, just before we finish up, is it true that there was actually cows? Because we know it was an actual barn before it was a theatre.
Yes.
Was there cows in it when there was actually performances and things going on?
No, we have had a goat on stage, but never cows.
Get a goat on stage? Oh, that's okay. That makes up for it. I was a little bit gutted there for a second.
So it's not a myth then?
No.
It was actually a barn?
I wasn't just making it up. Thanks again for your time, Janet. That's fantastic. So throughout the show, we've had a look at famous theatres and had a look behind the scenes. But what happens when you take that performance out onto the streets? Well, South Bank and Covent Garden are home to the best street performers in London, and it gives them a chance to showcase their talents. We sent out Emily Blake to take a look at some of these performers and find out more about what they do.
I'm here today in central London to have a look at a slightly different approach on theatre. Now, these performers don't get an annual salary like the West End stars, and they come to the streets to entertain their audiences. Let's go and have a look and see what they do best. For hundreds of years, London has been the perfect location for tourists to see street performances. Compared to other cities, London has some of the most varied types of entertainment, ranging from living statues to impressive acrobatics. Covent Garden is one of the prime locations to capture a glimpse of what London can offer. I caught up with Nick after a performance to find out more.
There is a sort of sense of community between the street performers. Generally speaking, we kind of look out for each other. And
is there any rivalry between the street performers?
Not really. We get several people doing big ladder acts or several people doing big unicycle acts, and you kind of have a friendly rivalry, but it's not like my show's better than your show or anything like that.
And how much money do you make?
The trade secret, that one, but it varies. Some days I'll make absolutely nothing. Some days the show just won't work like that did today. Other days it can be very profitable. So it varies, and obviously the seasons change. It is how I make my living. I'm an actor as well, but it is how I make my living in between acting jobs. So I'm basically here most days of the week. I've got a mortgage, wife and 2 kids, so have to make the money somehow.
So as you can see, you don't need to spend hundreds on bringing your family to the theatre. We've met some really interesting and lovely people today, and we've had just as much fun. So why don't you come down on your day off and enjoy the full experience for yourself?
Catch me out in a ladder all day. I feel so bad though, because I never ever tip the street performers.
You're just cheap. That could be a trait from your Scottish blood.
Oh, you try to say Scottish people are cheap?
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. We'd like to take a moment to say thanks to our special guest, Janet from the Barn Theatre.
And also don't forget to come back next week when we're going to be tuning in to the world of music and radio.
Bye for now.
See you later.